Hi, everybody. So this is task 2, where essentially what we're doing is just adding in some shade, lights, and shadows into our drawings. Um, and you can already see just from the thumbnails how people's drawings are starting to show dimension. And in fact, in a way, looking at the thumbnail like this is a really good way to see the lights and darks. So when you're working on a drawing, it can be really helpful to stand back from it, to get up and walk away a few feet and then just start seeing it, from a distance, because I do think it can really help. So that's what I found. Okay, so we're going to be talking about everybody's drawings now, and again, like I mentioned in the previous group critique, this particular drawing is preparation for our final drawing, which we're going to devote a week and a half to. But every skill that we're learning here, that we've learned up until this point, we're going to be able to use. We're doing an interior drawing. So, lights and shadows, cast shadows, 1-point perspective, we're going to add an ellipse and a scale figure. So, and since I have your attention at this point, and I might not be able to, before you get started, say a few words before you get started on your final. When you work on your final, you know, you're going to be making it you're really just devoting more time to it. We're going to explore some different thumbnail views. You're going to write a concept statement about it, like you're going to say a few words about the interior space you want to draw, um, and then you're going to draw some thumbnails. That's the process of developing an idea, developing some thumbnails, and then essentially doing what you did here, which is developing a line drawing and then adding some light and shadow. um, so I think for it to be successful, I would stick to geometric shapes as much as possible. Um, you have to do an ellipse, but if you are still really just learning perspective, you want to be really, go out strong, just stick to doing like rectangles and squares. You can build a lot of amazing, realistic scenes with that, like with furniture, and avoid things like that are too detailed, that have a lot of curves, because again, it just will be a lot easier. So just those are some tips to keep in mind. Um, okay, so let's get started. We're going to start with Carol's drawing. And Carol, you mentioned something about blending. Let's get your drawing up here. Um, Let me just see what you said here. Okay, yeah, about blending. All right, so um, let's just take a look here. So, so let's just actually talk about that first. Uh, so in the learning activities, which I'm sure you probably saw this, there's a lot of great materials in here. And there's an introduction to shading, cast shadows, shading techniques, and shading basic shapes. But shading techniques, I think, is really helpful for your question because, you know, um, some people really like to blend, and blending can be really helpful where you kind of take and you sort of rub areas out, but it can also make things look really smudgy, as you notice. So an alternate is actually just, let's see, let's go to hatching. Cross hatching is a great technique because you don't have to do any smudging with it. As you move through, maybe we'll go to the next learning activity as well. But what you're essentially doing is to make an area lighter or darker, you're just increasing the number of lines. You might also be darkening your pencil, going from a darker pencil to a lighter one. Increasing lines, like thicker, kind of placing them closer together. Scribbling is another good one. Again, there's no smudging involved. You're just kind of getting darker and tighter scribbles. Stippling, which I really like, which most people don't have the patience for. None of these have blending techniques in any blending, really. They're blended. Let's see if I can get to the next one here. They look blended just because of the way you apply the line work to it. Like in here, this is probably not blended at all. It's probably just like very light cross hatching, that gets blended in. So, let's see if one is, yeah, this one's sort of like taking your lines in different directions. So maybe that'll be helpful to other folks as well. so that you can kind of keep it's about, I think also too it's about just developing your own personal style of drawing, what kind of shading technique you like. um, so maybe develop, kind of experiment with one of those. You're actually starting to do that in here, where you're kind of going back and forth in different directions. And you just kind of would probably want to be a little bit more orderly about it, how you do that. And a good way to do this is to just, get a scrap piece of paper. This is what we used to do. Draw some squares out, or you don't even need to just have squares, but then just practice within those until you find a little technique that you like. Okay, maybe that's helpful to you and other folks too. Okay, ooh, I love what's happening here with this back shadow, very dimensional. I think your walls look really good. I think when you work on the walls, sometimes what you have to do is look at your own environment to get information from that, because sometimes like we're learning cast shadows, which is very helpful, and we can sort of imagine like this is our light source, so we can start imagining, okay, this side here is going to be the brightest, maybe it's the white of the paper. This side is going to be um, medium, perhaps this is going to be dark. So you can start getting a sense of how the light affects it, the same way you have with this guy. The front of him is light, and then as we go around he gets darker. That's great. um, but then on the walls, sometimes it can get a little bit confusing, like how is the light going to hit the ceiling or these other areas? So that's where what I like to do is just turn on a light um, in a room, close all the windows and doors, and then sort of move it around and just see how it affects the ceiling and the walls. But I don't think you really have to do that. I think you've done a really nice job here, and I like I like how light and dark you've gone here, which I think is really good. You really push it so that you get I think um, the classroom talks about in most drawings how 10% is going to be the white of your paper, 10% is going to be the black, is going to be as black as you can get. That's 10%, of the drawing, and then 80% is everything else. So you can sort of see that there's like most is gray tones, and everything else, you get the dramatic lights and darks. Um, okay, so yeah, what I would say is, I think this looks good, but if you want to work on it just a little bit more, what I would say is maybe just even out some of um, your line work. If you ever get too directional in here, take some lines and sort of see if you go in different directions, so it starts to become less obvious the direction you have. And why do we do that? It's because actually, in perspective, when you get more of an even type of shading, then everything starts looking more dimensional. Um, like this is a little bit more expression, like what we could say is expressionistic shading, more kind of emotional type of shading, where we're not necessarily like working, we don't care so much whether a space looks really crisp and defined. um, so and that's a great technique for other types of drawings. um, and it's okay for this one too, but you could again, you could just work a little bit more on that. Okay, so that's it. Nice job. Let's see, is there anything else here? Uh, I might just say on this guy, if you can get on your lamp, if you can move, it's quite a small element in the sense that it doesn't have a lot of area, so it's a little harder to work with. But if you can move anywhere in here from lines, defining the edges from lines to light and shadow, that would be great. Like you've actually done that here. Can you see how there's no, like your lines are starting to completely go away? And that's what we're looking for, because that gives us the most depth as well. And I think pretty much everywhere else in your drawing. Maybe your guide could be maybe a little bit more too, like removing the outlines and moving towards replacing it with light and shadow. Okay, Jesus. All right. Yeah, I like the window and the additional lamp you added. That's terrific. Really fills out your composition. And let me just see here. So yeah, I like the depth you created there. It looks like maybe what's going on with this? Yeah, maybe this line here. Can you see the bottom here? It feels like maybe it just needs a tiny bit of straightening there. It's interesting how it's so close you have it, but that sometimes just a little bit off can it can make it appear that it's not quite in perspective. Um, okay, so with the cat, so it looks like you're gonna start with your shading at this point. You've got your light to dark scale here, which is great. Just remember here to put to map out your cast shadows, like we talked about in the previous. Um, I'm sorry, the previous assignment. You're going to box in this shape, right? So you're going to box it in so that you've got it nicely boxed, so that you can see. You can just put some guidelines in here so you can see these edges um, clearly, and then you're going to add in your vanishing points. Just remember what we did. Remember how we did that before? You can just go back to that one and follow along. So you're going to add that in there before you start adding your light and shadow. You're going to do the same thing with this guy. Make sure that you've got that cast out, and now you're going to add it too with this element. Okay, and then do that, and then just start analyzing it. Where you're going to so if this is your light source right here, this is your light. What's going to happen here? Like, where is it going to be? I would imagine that on the top here, it's going to be the lightest part, and then on the side, it's going to get darker, on these side edges, right? Um, on your guy, he's going to be lightest here where the light hits it, and as we move around, it's going to get darker. So you're just going to try to, I would definitely look at the video tutorial for this assignment on shading. I think it does a really fantastic job at just showing how you can start filling in the layers of light and shadow. You can go through and do a few rounds of it. So that's where you want to just keep going with your goal, what you're doing, and start filling it in. Patricia, yes, shading does take some practice, and it really it does take practice. So let's see here. So so this is your light source, is that right? I think this is where your light source is. It's a little bit unclear here. I think this is it. Hmm. Yes, so I think so, because I see a shadow there. So what that says is that you probably do need to work just a little bit more at clarifying that. Really think about where your light source is and how it's going to affect the scene. And also, you make sure your cast shadows can really help with that. Like, so for example, here, I'm going through the bottom of this is your shadow vanishing point, and that's going to be the direction it goes in. And then we're going to take and go through the top here. And so that's going to be our very first point right here. So this is the angle. So you would actually, this would not be here, like right in here. So we could just go and, let's see if I can erase this. Just to show you. So this here would be, it doesn't really make it look that good. So, but you would get rid of that, and then you would try to get this one done here, this corner, and we'd go through the shadow vanishing point at the bottom, and in this section right here. So this is actually, if you try to imagine it's actually going outside of the picture plane, but that's okay. We can still join it up, and so it's going to be going through this area. So it's pretty close, but you just want to make it a little bit more accurate. Okay. Um, just things like that can really help your drawing. And then in terms of the actual shading, again, keep sort of thinking about, so just imagine, okay, here's the light, it's coming over here, it's hitting this a little, like more straight on, this is going to be a little darker, and then this is going to be the darkest, which is close to what you are doing here already. I would just like I talked to Carol, think about how to use one of the shading techniques from the learning materials or the learning activities area to start working, in a more logical way. Like maybe you want to do cross hatching. which I recommend. I think cross-hatching works really well. Or the technique in the assignment tutorial that we have, which is a kind of form of cross-hatching, so that, that you get a little bit, it'll create more depth in your drawing. Right now you're sort of going in different directions here, and it's making the drawing not quite as flat as it, or the surface is not quite as flat as they could be. So that's what I'd work on just a little bit more. Just kind of refining things, um, clarifying some of the perspective. It looks like maybe this dresser should, there's a line here, I think. So I don't know if I caught it last time, but so this is correct, but this side here, it's actually going to be this, it's going to be connected up here, instead of back here. That makes sense? This is where your vanishing point is, right through here. And then just continuing to kind of add more shade and shadow so that you start removing the lines around things. So I would just keep experimenting. Okay, Alexandra, so let's see here. Your light source is this your light source here through the window? I think that looks right, right? It's definitely not here. So, okay, so this is your light source. And yeah, okay, so it's going through here and here. Good, good. So that looks good. So I would say, so actually sort of somewhat similar to what I just said to Patricia, which is I think what you want to do as well is work a little bit more on your shading technique. You just kind of want to avoid just going over the entire drawing with a lot of, quick random marks. And spend a little bit more time kind of carefully shading it in. You're actually starting to do that quite well here and here. Slow it down, go really slowly, experiment with different thicknesses of the pencil. When you want to go darker, then you go with a softer pencil, and harder pencils work with lighter areas, and just really kind of, experiment with your technique. That will also create a little bit more definition around your elements. Right now they're starting to kind of blur together just a little bit, and you want them to be as crisp as possible. I actually think this is starting to look pretty good, your lamp. So you just want to keep going with that method. Watch with the really strong outlines here, because it starts to make it not look flat. It's like doing something to the rug, which makes it look like, I would probably try to see if you can lift up a little of the outlines there, and then maybe lighten it up a little bit so that it looks a little flatter, because it doesn't look like it's quite sitting in the space yet. And I think that might just be also the shape of the ellipse. It's starting to look elliptical. It probably just needs a little more practice. Ellipses are challenging to get them to look, like they are sitting in the space. That's the main thing. I would keep working on, this area here, maybe defining this area a little bit more, thinking about, so here we've got the light coming in from the window. So this is, again, a great way to work with this is to have an open window, light coming in, have all the lights off in a room, the doors closed, see what happens. See what happens in your room. What is going to happen is actually the wall where the light is coming in is actually going to be the wall that's the darkest. This wall right here is going to be the darkest. Why? It's because the light is not going to be able to come around and hit it. Like if you imagine the ray of light coming in, it can't come back there. So this is often the darkest wall. And then, this, maybe the ceiling, this might be maybe this would be the darkest wall. It would depend. I'm just kind of thinking, I'm looking in a room right now. I've got 2 windows open, so I really should close one, but this wall is definitely the darkest. And then I also see, this is actually working pretty well here. So this is lighter, and we gradually get darker in the ceiling towards the end. So that might be a good idea, just sort of experiment, take a look in one of your rooms to see how that light works. Okay. I think your character, for the next assignment, when you do a character, try to do it a little less gesturally. That kind of make it look more like a kind of a, let's see, kind of just some sort of simple shape. Like you don't necessarily have to do it like this, but like simple geometric shape. It can look like a mannequin or something like that, that, has form, like a form. it can be just sort of really like a tube person, like made out of a bunch of like tubes, just so that you can start shading it in, That way you'll get more dimension in your character, and it can fit into the idea of perspective. Massa, so I just read in the previous thread that you got into a car accident. That's terrible. I hope you're feeling better. And I'm glad you were able to submit this assignment. No doubt it looks like you were probably a little bit rushed because of your time constraints. So um, I'm going to just start by maybe talking a little bit about I'm going to sort of talk about the task 1 elements, which is the composition and the perspective. And it looks like you've got, your main element here, which is this, nice unit here, which I think looks pretty good in terms of the perspective. That looks really, really good, your shelves and everything. And then you've got a TV there. You've got a window and a lamp and a rug. I would say for your rug, I'm going to work just a little bit more on the perspective. This is working with oval shapes is difficult, and really the only way that I can do them is by using the ellipse technique. This is exactly what I use here for 3-point perspective, which is, let's see, I think it's the next one, inscribing circles, which is, takes a little bit of effort, but you essentially have to do this technique to get it so that you can find these circular edges. So that's what I would do there, is just go back in there and fix that one. And the reason sometimes, ellipses, people struggle with them, and sometimes I don't recommend revising because it can be a lot of work. But in your case, it is such a large area. I do think it'll look really good if you fix it, because it's so important. Something else that you could do here as well is maybe put something in the middle here, like maybe just some kind of real simple little table. It doesn't have to be fancy, like I'm just gonna, something here that you could put in that will ground it. It'll be your simple coffee table. I'm not even going back to the vanishing points here because you know how to do that. But just like something you could put in. It's very useful to do something like this because that way also it's very easy to cast a shadow from a simple object in the middle of the room. Maybe you could put some doors on here, to make it like a little fancier. But, just something that you can just give your composition a little bit more going on. Okay, so I would recommend that. And let's go back here. And then with your shading, you definitely want to slow down here. It looks like you were in a super big rush, which is understandable, but shading really does take a lot of time. If you look at the assignment tutorial, you can see how the person doing the drawing is like slowly going over it, and you can just kind of get a cup of tea or coffee or whatever you like to drink and sit down for a couple of hours, just relax and do the shading. I personally find it a lot easier to go lighter and to add layers. So start light, continue to build, get darker and darker. So I think that's the main thing here, is you just need to slow down and make sure that you're really considering your light source and how it's going to affect all the different parts in your drawing. I'm not 100% sure where your light source is. Is it this one right here? You want to be using one of these elements, like one of these, this set or this set. I would probably recommend maybe this set, So it'll help, to use those points in understanding how to set up the cast shadows. I talked a lot about the cast shadows in the previous video, the grouped critique. So you might want to take a look at that. I do a little bit of practice with that, and also, the tutorial for that assignment is quite good too. Okay, so I look forward to seeing your revision.